Good day, everybody, welcome to today's video. If you come to today's video, I'm going to show you the procedure on going through if you ever have to remove your intake off your Vortec engine. Now, for reasons, I have to remove my intake because I got to pull the heads off of it due to an unfortunate accident, I'd like to say. It's misfortunate, but one of the things you gotta start doing when you start to remove the intake, of course, you gotta remove the wiring you have. Everybody's setup's gonna be different, especially mine that's custom. I don't wanna start jabbering, so I'm gonna start removing the lid. I'm gonna start pulling the wiring off, start disconnecting everything, get ready to have the intake off. Pull the cover. Then you wanna remove your air filter assembly. There's hundreds of different styles. It's pretty easy, disconnect it from the throttle body. And then pull it off, disconnect your MAF sensor. Once you start getting your manifold exposed, you need to start pulling your wiring harness off. So now that you've done away with pretty much all the wiring, you got a hose on this side to disconnect from the valve cover. Also need to disconnect the hose down there. You have your throttle cable to disconnect. If you have cruise control, you'll need to disconnect that as well. I got a manual throttle body, so I got the steam vent lines I need to disconnect. Of course, you'd have to drain your coolant for that a little bit. And then your fuel lines. I got aftermarket fuel lines, so I need to remove them. Now, I haven't had this system pressured up with fuel yet, but if you need to depressurize your system, there's a couple ways you could do it. You could remove the fuel pump relay or fuse and then crank it over till it dies. Or there's this valve right here. And you could get a rag and push that little Schrader valve in and bleed it off that way. It is messy. I highly recommend just pulling the fuse or the relay and cranking it over. So I'm gonna pull all those off. Pull the steam lines off. It could be a little bit of a pain in the butt. So in the intake, looks like there is 10 bolts you need to remove. And by remove, I mean loosen. They don't actually physically come out, but loosen them enough that they're no longer biting.
To minimize dirt and garbage from getting into the motor, take an air gun and blow off as much as you possibly can. Just take your time. I use the electronic powered ratchet, but you can do it by hand.
Now theoretically, if you have everything disconnected, the manifold like that will just pull off. Moving along, ready to reinstall the intake. After doing the head gaskets, one of the first things you want to do before you install the intake is to make sure all your mating surfaces are clean. I went through and cleaned them off with some brake cleaner and a rag. I got this from Summit Racing, and it shows you the torque specs, and you got to remember inch pounds, not foot pounds. Don't confuse those because you're gonna break the bolts off. Put the intake on.
The intake itself will go on nice and easy and drop right into place.
This is where you want to take a moment. Make sure no wires or anything are cut underneath the runners. And if you're good, start snugging it down. You can do it by hand. Torque specs are really low. I like to use a gun and just run it in carefully.
Now I'm reposting this again so you can see the orientation and how you torque the bolts down in series. Basically start in the middle and work your way around. 2 passes.
First pass, 44 inch-pounds. I use this little 1/4 inch torque wrench that is only rated in inch-pounds. And of course, if you want to make it simple, just put your diagram up top and let's go through the first pass.
Now, if you've never used a torque wrench before, you might want to practice on something first because this intake is plastic and the torque specs are really low. So if there's any confusion, you may end up damaging the intake, and then you're really gonna be upset.
Gonna do the final pass, 89 inch-pounds. The slack is already taken out of the bolts. This last pass is gonna go real quick.
Once you have everything down to the proper torque, you can go ahead and start hooking up all your hoses, your fuel line, run your electrical, all that back up. And hopefully you won't have any issues or leaks, because the last thing you want to do is go through all this trouble and then have to redo it all over again. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you have any questions or comments, post them below. I'll see you guys in the next one.